All right, hi everybody, and welcome to Big Picture History, Canadian history in one lesson. My name is Mr. Powell, as most of you know by this point in the series, and I created Big Picture History because I love history so much, and I'm trying to communicate that to as many people as possible and help with this very difficult subject that tends to trip a lot of homeschoolers up. It's hard to find a curriculum that can at all interest people and keep them interested. And I know full well that over time, what happens to kids, the more they study history, the less they like it. The more time you spend studying the past and thinking of history as merely the study of the past, the more you're going to have an internal struggle with the subject. The more you're going to feel like it's a waste of time, because we, of course, do not live in the past, and we need information on navigating the world around us. That's what really is of use. Right? And so most people think history is useless because they don't see any practical reason to learn it. There's kind of a general premise that you can become sort of cultured if you know some history. And you know people like that. They do have that ability to articulate stories concerning things that happened in the past. But if you look at whether or not that has any practical application to their lives, you really will very rarely find anything there. So the question is, how do we get a version of history that gives us some present day relevant understanding, something powerful, something useful, because it can do that. My version of history, the one that I'm here to put in front of you to see if you are interested, is the study of the world we live in, not the past. What we do in that study is we look at the world from a certain perspective. That's the way it always works. We always look at the world from a certain perspective. If I look at it from the perspective of the building blocks of matter, then I'm a physicist or a chemist. If I look at the world from the perspective of what explains living entities and how they function, I'm looking at it from the perspective of biology. If I want to look at it from the perspective of money and how governments finance themselves and so on, I'm looking at it from the perspective of economics. Well, I want to put forward before you here this vision of studying the world from the perspective of how did it come to be this way? From the perspective of this natural question that occupies us all as children. I believe it truly is a feature of our natural curiosity. It's a part of us evolving as human beings. You remember, you're still young, you remember that time, maybe, this was early in your life, where most of the time you spent interrogating the world, and you had mom and dad there, and you said, "What's that? What's that? What's this?" Right? And you said it over and over, and mom kept telling you, right, "This is a banana. This is a car, this is a toy, this is what have you," right? And you were learning and you were excited because you were learning about the world because of all these fantastic entities that you find in it, right? And then you graduate to a new set of questions about the world. The one that tends to really get parents eventually pretty frustrated, right? Not merely the what, the who. What kind of questions are those, right? You graduate to a new kind of question. What is the one that I'm thinking of here? Right? The one that indicates that your thinking is evolving to a new level. Matthew, Caitlin?
What if?
What if? Well, that's an interesting one. But usually when your parents tell you stuff, or especially when they tell you to do stuff, you got a new question for them, Sigourney.
Why?
Why? Exactly. And that is a beautiful question. And hopefully your parents spent a lot of time talking to you and articulating reasons for the way things are and why they choose to do certain things, and they explain themselves and they respect the fact that you've got this mind that needs to interrogate the world. That's the way it works. We ask questions, we seek the answers. It's human. The problem for us, all of us, when we study history is the normal way of doing it, especially in government schools, is to teach us this subject that has nothing to do with us. And then this natural curiosity, it dies inside of us. It's really sad, but it happens to too many people. It dies because we are told that there's this information that we should pay attention to. And then we ask the child's question, why? And there's no answer. It's really sad. I've been there. I've been in college classes where 18, 19, 20-year-old people still are asking why. They're still hoping somebody's got an answer. Why? Because it's university. People are supposed to know the why answers. And they don't know. And then you let go and you say, okay, nobody else understands the world. I'm going to give up. I'm not going to understand the world. It's very sad. I see it a lot. I saw it all around me as a college student. And it was really hard for me to not fall into that trap as well, to keep asking the questions. And I had started asking the big questions in my own life. I only recall starting to ask those questions when I was actually almost ready to be an engineer. I mean, I was educated. I had the math. I had the science. I thought I had all those STEM subjects and they were going to do it for me. They weren't explaining the world to me, not in the way that every human being needs it explained. And I figured out, it took me a long time, that there's answers out there. There are answers out there that only a certain subject can provide, and history is the one. Thomas Jefferson once said that history is that knowledge most useful to us. I've come to agree with him. I mean, I love a lot of subjects. And my students of history know I love art. I love philosophy. I love to teach all kinds of things to my students. But all of this revolves around what I consider to be an irreplaceable value. And that is what history can show us about the world. So that's what I'm here to try to transmit. In particular today, of course, the subject that we are interested to know more about is Canadian history. Now, I had anticipated that this class would be full of Canadians, and I wouldn't have to kind of say, okay, what is the purpose? What's the motivation here for studying Canada? Because if you live in Canada, if you're Canadian, then it's obvious. It's like, what is this place that I'm in? What kind of country is this? And how did it come to be this way? And so on. It should be obvious. It turns out that most of my students today are American, so my motivation is going to be a little bit different for you, precisely because when people look at the world, they see two pretty awesome countries. Really, truly, these are both awesome countries. I would be completely comfortable saying that both of them belong in the top 5 of all time. I love these countries. They're amazing. And so I'm getting goosebumps because these are great places. And in particular, I'd hope to talk more with Canadian students about this. But Canada is a wonderful place, and it's a really special part of the world. So that all by itself should be a reason to want to know more about it. Most people, however, when they put these side by side, and especially Americans, when they put these two side by side, they really feel like America overawes the picture. It is this, America's I call it a colossus. Right? Colossus is a giant. It's a country that's just amazingly, staggeringly powerful and collectively wealthy and influential. By comparison, Canada is about the 10th of the size in terms of its population. And fractionally much less influential in the world. In particular, because America is so militarily powerful, it has chosen and undertaken this mission of affecting the world so directly in a way that a smaller country like Canada couldn't possibly do. So this sets up a little bit of a challenge with regard to Canadian history, which is, it's not the issue is, if we're interested in Canada, the question in history is not so much, is it a nice place? Is it a free country? Is it a good place to live, and so on? That is absolutely the case. But when we study history, we don't ask primarily, is something good or bad? That's not what we do when we study history. Because sometimes you can get an example of something that's really bad, but you have to study it anyway. Who can give me an example of that? Something that is really awful, but there's no choice, you have to study it. Give me an example. Alex?
War.
War, yeah, almost all of them, right? I mean, an example, World War II. Nazism is, it makes you sorry to be a human being while you're learning about Nazism. It really feels so shameful that one human being, any human being, could do something like that to another human being, right? Or terrorism, or there's so many different things out there that are negative, but we have to pay attention to them. There's no choice. And so, good or bad is not the question that that motivates us when we study history, right? The question, the kind of value judgment that we engage in, is not, is this good or bad, when we're looking at things to study in history. History is driven by another kind of question. And again, as a teacher here, it's important to me to name things that are going through your head, but oftentimes for you as a student, you don't even know you're asking these, or you don't have the ability to introspect or to capture the questions that are driving you. So let me tell you that there's a question that you're always going to be faced with anytime you decide to study anything in history. And it's very simple. And the question is this: is it worth my time? Is it worth my energy? Is it worth the focus that I'm going to expend on this, the mental power that I have, and the limited amount of life I have? Is it worthy of that? Now, that means, and this is called a historical value judgment with regard to things in the past. There's a lot of different kinds of value judgments that we human beings engage in. To be technical about it, okay, when we ask the question, is something important? Is it worth studying in history? What we ask is a historical value judgment. And that's where it's challenging when it comes to Canada, because you look around and you see this America, this United States, it's a colossus. It's so in your face important for a lot of people in the world. It's life and death important. And then you have this nice quiet country, Canada. Very polite. Doesn't seem to be much going on. Is it important? Right? That becomes the question. And so it's not. Is it a nice place? That is unequivocally, obviously true. Canadians have a reputation around the world as very nice people. But is it important? And what is important about it? My answer is, I wouldn't give this class if I didn't have it as my answer. My answer is yes. It is important. How? Okay, how? It's a much smaller, much less influential country. Okay, how? Well, I have a peculiar answer, and I think it will. It's my own answer, but I know that a lot of Canadians think this way as well, and so I think it's I won't say it's a standard answer, but my formulation goes like this: Canada is worthy of our attention, especially Americans, because it's not the United States. Canada's different. It's unique. And that uniqueness, especially of a neighboring country to the colossus that is America, that uniqueness is worthy of attention. Okay, that's going to be my case for you today. That's at least where I want to start. Of course, the question is, what is unique? What is that uniqueness? And what about Canada is worth studying? History is going to hopefully give us the insight into that question. And at the end, hopefully you will also still be with me on that one, right? right? So let's try to understand why the world is a better place with Canada in it and that it's worthy of our attention historically. Well, I'm going to focus right off the bat on what I consider to be the driving, the famous, just the indelibly important symbol of that, which in and of itself is just the flag of Canada. This is so much the symbol of the country of Canada that I struggle to think of a country in the world that has a more distinctive flag. I mean, the United States has an amazing flag. It's a special and symbolic flag too. But various countries have stripes and various countries have stars. I don't mean to belittle the stars and stripes, right? But there's no country in the world that has a flag like this. There really isn't. It's so distinctive and it's so symbolic of Canada. And if you're watching the Olympics now, you're always seeing it in the stands. You know, it's just such a powerful symbol. And what I find striking about it is it's an incredibly young symbol. And this is where history comes in, right? The appreciation of the things that we take for granted around us. We look at the world and we say there's this in it, and we don't even really take it seriously, right? If you're studying Chinese history and I start to teach you about made in China and it's a miracle, then, all of a sudden it gets interesting. If I teach you about Canada and I bring up the Canadian flag and you look at it and you say, well, yeah, that's the Canadian flag. Well, I tell you what, this flag is barely older than I am, which is admitting a little too much, but it's not much older than me. So this has not been the Canadian flag for most of history, and yet somehow it has become so symbolic of Canada. It's such a powerful symbol that captures the uniqueness of Canada. So right there we have a story. We have a story behind that. Let me tell you what the story is. This was the flag of Canada beforehand. So, what happened? What do you see in the top left here? Why was this the flag of Canada? So, Gurney, what's in the top left here?
The Union Jack from Britain.
For Union Jack from Britain. Okay, right. And so why was that part of the Canadian flag? The flag of another country? Matthew, Caitlin?
They did the same like us. They revolted or...
No. You see, because this was the flag. Oh, are you saying that this flag is a sign of revolution?
No.
Oh, okay. But this flag, it had the British flag in it, and the Canadians kept that in it proudly and happily.
Oh.
So why was it in there?
Because they were British?
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly it. Because Canada is the outcome of, primarily, in its history, because of the impact of Britain on its culture. In fact, it's embedded in the other part of this flag. Do you know what this is? This thing that you're seeing there on the rest of the flag? It's pretty neat. It's called an escutcheon. You can look that up on Wikipedia. It's a symbol of heraldry, so you can learn all kinds of historical things about a country or a place based on the escutcheon and what are the features of the escutcheon. For instance, why are there 3 lions against a red background on the escutcheon? Anybody know? What are the 3 lions? What do they stand for? They are the symbol of England. If you see the English soccer team, they always have a crest with 3 lions on it. What is the red lion with a gold background? Scotland. So England, Scotland. What do you think is the blue with the yellow lyre? Anybody? This is kind of leading you along here. England, Scotland. Fatima?
Wales.
Nice try. No, Wales doesn't feature on here, which upsets me because I'm Welsh. So Powell is a Welsh name. So how come Wales isn't on here? It upsets me. Matthew, Caitlin?
Ireland.
Ireland, yes. Okay, and then what is the blue with the fleur-de-lis, as they are called? What does that represent? A little bit of one of these isn't like the other. Okay, what is the blue with the fleur-de-lis? Sigourney? France, yes, okay. And then the bottom is the kind of distinctive thing, right? It's those maple leaves again, right? So this features also in the coat of arms of Canada, Amari usque ad mare, which means it's Latin, it means from sea to sea. Right, and so it is. You can see the flag of Britain. You can see the flag of France. You can see them built into the symbols of those countries, built into the escutcheon as well. And so Canada was a part of the British Empire, and its flag represented that. And Canada did not rebel like America did. Okay, but. Eventually, Canadians grew tired of having this flag. Somehow it didn't represent who they are. And the Prime Minister of Canada, whose name was Lester B. Pearson at the time, said to Canadians, we need a symbol that shows that we are not just a part of the British Empire, we are a unique country. And we've earned our place in the world. We're different, we're unique. So we need a flag that represents that. And the Canadians had a contest in 1965. This is when it all happened and when it went down. And you see they had this contest and they had the old flag and then people submitted designs and artists and everybody and they came up with designs and the maple leaf was the winner. So this is actually, to my way of thinking, the first anchor fact of Canadian history in the sense that this fact, 1965, the adoption of the Canadian flag, right? It's a young country, as we'll see, but the flag is really young. It's almost as young as I am. So the flag is really young, and it's only in 1965 that Canadians started to use this symbol. But now it's such an amazing symbol. People wear it on backpacks. All the people at the Olympics are waving it and so on, and it's so symbolic of Canada. But look, it's just started in 1965. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Canada's evolution as a country, in particular to the point where this symbol of Canadian independence and difference and uniqueness, with regard to what exactly, that's going to be the key to the subject. But basically now we have this country and it certainly is unique and it certainly is independent, and the flag that was adopted in 1965 symbolizes that. Okay, so we're going to ask the question, how did there come to be a country that would only choose its own flag in 1965? You can ask the question in a bunch of different ways, right? But how did there come to be a country that would choose such a symbol? Such a distinctive red and white and a maple leaf, and why would that be the thing that Canadians would want to have? Right, so off we go. Here comes the story. In the big picture history approach, what we do to explain the present, a country of this sort, this unique country with this unique symbol, what we do is we go back to the past and we say, all right, how did the world come to be this way? Well, it always gets back to the beginning. It always goes back to the beginning. So, where does Canada really get its distinctive beginning? How does it become a distinctive country? Why is it different than America, in particular, its neighbor, right? So what is its distinctive beginning? Well, this is definitely it right here. The distinctive beginning that sets Canada on a different course than America for its entire history is that it was not colonized by the English. Starting in 1608, Canada was colonized by the French. So some of you may know, Canada has two official languages, English and French, unlike America. So the impact of France on Canada's history is the first ingredient that explains its historical impact, is the first ingredient that explains the difference between these two countries. So the man responsible for this initiative was Samuel de Champlain, or Champlain, as Americans might pronounce it, and he created the colony of Quebec. And that, of course, is a city to this day, but he arrived in his European style, a large vessel, right? And we see this painting, this rendering kind of the meeting of the Europeans, the French, and the native tribes that were there. In Quebec, they were part of a group of tribes called the Algonquins. And so in Canada, they call them the First Nations. In America, people tend to call them Native Americans, but in Canada, the First Nations people, as they are known, these were Algonquin Indians, and they, of course, were fascinated and afraid of and interested in these Europeans who arrived, and were really in no position to deny them coming to Canada. And so they started to settle, and their impact was very little, and as a result, they didn't have a lot of friction with the natives. The successful colonization of Quebec by Champlain and the French proceeded gradually over time. And in fact, they were able to penetrate deeply into North America to an extent that the English were not, such that they actually, as you can see from this map here, were able to lay claim to vast tracts of North America, including a lot of what we call the United States today, right? Because Detroit, Détroit, they call it in French, and then New Orleans, which is really Nouvelle-Orléans, which is French as well. These names in America, right, they're actually there, and in some places there's actually quite a bit of French spoken, or a broken sort of French spoken in Louisiana, which is named after King Louis of France. So there's a lot of America that reflects this presence of the French here as well. Of course, this is Canadian history, so what we've got to focus on here is the fact that this led to a conflict between the English and the French. Pardon me. The English were here on the East Coast in what we call the 13 colonies, right? And then they'd also begun to penetrate up here to what's called Hudson Bay in Canada in the north, and they were looking for a northern passage to Asia, which they weren't able to find back then. But so the English had this territory, the French had the stuff in the inside, well, what do we know about the French and the English? I mean, in European history so far, I haven't focused on it much in big picture history, but the French and the English, any thoughts? Really friendly relations? Anybody have any thoughts, Sigourney? Sorry, hold on, Sigourney. Go ahead.
They don't like each other.
They never liked each other. When we do advanced European history in one lesson, for those of you who have done that with me, it's coming up, advanced European history in one lesson. It's coming up in the next few weeks, and I'll tell you about the French and the English, because that's kind of, European Union is all about the French and the Germans. But the French and the English and their relationship has had a big effect, especially on North America. And so they went to war, and they fought for control over North America because they didn't get along. And it was the English that won. It was the English that won. So in what Americans call the French and Indian War, and the rest of the world calls the 7 Years' War, Canadians call it the 7 Years' War, from 1756 to 63, the English defeated the French and took over Canada. So what happened? Now this is cool. This is a painting that I like to teach to my students when I do classes called History Through Art, because it's a great example of, if you go to Wikipedia, you will actually not find this painting. You will find the one on the left. And what do I mean by you will not find this painting? Because a lot of people don't understand art. And the people on Wikipedia evidently do not understand art. Why? Because there's a big difference between the one on the right and on the left. And it's not the lighting. Who knows the clue that is desperately missing on the left, that is present on the right, that explains the meaning of this war? Isn't that in one picture, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words? Well, you better watch out. You got to see the right picture. This painting is a great painting, and it shows the death of the English commander who conquered Quebec. His name was General Wolfe. But he's dying here. But that's not the only meaning of the painting. Who knows? You know, have you done those games? What's different between the one on the right and the left? Tell me what's different. What's missing on the left? That's an even more potent question. Can you see? Nobody can see it. Wow. I'll show you. All right, I'll show you. This is not present on the left, is it? Why? Because somebody who wasn't thinking clearly trimmed it off. Now, what's the big deal? Well, do you see that all the characters over here are all pointing over there? Why are they pointing to this figure in the background? Anybody? What's this figure doing? Running towards them? Waving a hat? But what's the other thing? Can you see what this is? Nope. It's a flag. All right, that's enough hints already. Why is this important? Somebody's running with the flag. They're all pointing to the commander who's dying, but they're saying, look over there, there's a flag. It's coming towards us. You really need another hint? Who's ever played Capture the Flag? All right, I'm going to have to check my technical apparatus here because I feel like I'm the only one here. This is not what I expect. Okay, whoa, somebody's actually raising their hands. Matthew, Caitlin, go ahead.
Capture the flag.
What does it mean when you capture the flag?
He takes over.
You win! Exactly! So this painting has to show the victory of the English over the French. The one on the left doesn't. The one on the left just shows the death of the commander. But the meaning of the death is that he fought in the war and won. England takes over Canada in the 7 Years' War. So Canada is a unique country. First, because it started off as French, but after a couple hundred years, transferred to British control. English, British. I hope you guys know that they're almost interchangeable. British means English plus the rest, right? Scotland, Ireland, and the rest. So British control after the 7 Years' War. All right, so Canada is the way that it is, in part because of that. And that's a kind of an interesting fact for Canadian history as well. Why? Because what comes not long after this? Let's do some American history transposition. What comes not long after this in American history? Somebody detect for me. What's an anchor fact of American history? Alex?
American Revolution.
Yes. What year?
1776.
All right, 1776 is the Declaration of Independence, right? So Americans are going to declare independence not long after England takes over North America. They're connected. I have to teach you that in advanced American history. In fact, I'm doing one of those classes tomorrow, so maybe some of you are joining me for that. So advanced American history, we'll talk about that more. But Canadians did not join the American Revolution. They were asked, you want to join us? We're rebelling against Britain. Come on, let's get out of here. And the Canadians said, no. And so why not? Why did the French, who had just been conquered by the British, why didn't they want to rebel against Britain? Wouldn't you think that Frenchmen would want to get out of the British Empire? Actually, no. They liked it. They actually liked it because England had more freedom than France. And so for them, joining the British Empire was a good thing. They liked it. There was a lot of commercial opportunities. The British Empire was more commercialized. It was more extensive. It was freer. They had great opportunities to trade in the British Empire that they didn't have in the French Empire. That was a real mess. The French king was doing a terrible job. So they liked it and they didn't want to rebel. So Canada did not rebel against Britain, along with America. Instead, Canada had to be essentially given its nationhood or its status as a country by Britain. It didn't tear it out of Britain's hands. It was given its national status by Britain because it was really well behaved. So when did that happen? When did that happen? It was in 1867, essentially. Although, as we're going to see, this gets to be a pretty tricky issue in Canadian history. It's a strange story. Because Canada's founding fathers, if you will, or they're called the Fathers of the Confederation, including the first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, who's pictured here in this image along with the rest. Well, what they did was they accepted a certain bargain with the British Crown that was an act of the British Parliament that said, Canada, go ahead, you're going to be a dominion now. 1st of July, 1867, it was all ratified. The arrangement was made. The Dominion of Canada came to be. What's a dominion? This is actually the date that Canadians celebrate as Canada Day, right? It's the national birthday, the July 1st, not the Americans' 4th of July. With Canada, it's July 1st, Canada Day as it's called. It's a kind of a peculiar choice in a way because that's when Canada became a dominion. What is that? Anybody know? No? Nobody knows what that is. It's too complicated. That actually doesn't matter. Except that it's not quite a country. Wait a minute. If it's Canada Day, but a dominion is not a country, why would they celebrate that as the birthday? Let's see if we can figure this out. It's a strange story. It's a unique story. By that point in history, Canada was composed of 4 parts: Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Canadians recognize these as provinces today. You might know that Canada is not organized with states. It's organized into provinces. And so those ones existed at that point. Still, the French part was the most important, but gradually the English parts were growing as well. And so they made a bargain to build a country of their own. And the dominion status that was given to them was basically a grant by the British Crown that said, you guys can make your own laws. Go ahead. You guys decide how you're going to organize this thing we call Canada. Go ahead. Okay. But why did I say it's not a country? Or at least, if you got historians in a room and you talk to them about when does Canada become a country, you're bound to have a pretty interesting discussion. Because it's not like America. It's not, there's no clean break in that sense. It's more of a process. And that has very much shaped Canadian identity. So what was the process? And why do I say it wasn't a country, first of all? Why do I say it's a... Well, let me ask you guys this. What's the test? How do you know what's a country? What do countries do that, let's say, colonies don't do, or imperial provinces or possessions don't do? What is a country to you? Let me ask you guys that. What is a country? What can a country do? Don't you live in a country? What does it do? Right? Have you thought it through at all? What is a country? Alex?
I do not know.
Oh, that's a good answer. I like that answer. That is an honest answer and a useful answer. Because people who think they know stuff but don't, they'll never learn it. But people who don't and who face it are ready to learn. So you're ready. Sigourney, what's a country?
They make their own laws.
Okay, people have a country who can make their own laws. Okay, so that's partly what the Dominion idea was, that Canadians can make their own laws. But I'm going to be more specific now with regard to Canada. Okay, so wait a minute. With regard to what else could you make laws? What would be something else that you could decide on that wouldn't just be about you, but it would be about what? Somebody else? Something else? What could you imagine being something other than making your own laws for your own people? Isn't that enough, what Sigourney said as the definition? What else? Fatima?
Freedom.
Well, that's interesting. Now, you can have a country without freedom. There's a country called North Korea. They don't have any freedom. So, no, that's not part of a country. I mean, countries have their own government, and the laws and the power of the government can be used for good or ill, and so no, that's not part of what a country is. But you might be trying to say independence, Fatima, because in American history we have the Declaration of Independence, and independence means what? Your relationship to others. Right? Can you stand on your own? Was Canada a country that could stand on its own in the world? That's where we enter into an interesting puzzle, because the answer is no. No, it was not. So when do we get evidence of that? When do we see, wait a minute, Canadians celebrate this as the birthday of the country, but wait a minute, Canada wasn't really a country yet, actually. No, it was not. Because it did not have control over its relationship to other countries. So where's the proof? The proof lies in the events that are illustrated by this map, related to this map, which doesn't have Canada on it, right? This is Europe. And this map shows us the situation in Europe before what? Conflict. If you've done American history with me, you should know. Fatima?
World War One.
World War I, okay. And you can see that Canada's mother country, the UK or Great Britain, is here. You can see that it's in alliances with other countries. And it's going to get involved in World War I. Now, if you are an independent country like the United States, and the people of Europe go to war, does that affect you? Are you at war if they go to war? A little bit of review of American history here again, right? Was America in World War I at first? Not until what? Not until what American president and his announcement that said what? Nico. Crank up the microphone there, Nico. Did we manage to set up your audio earlier? I don't think we did. I need somebody else. What American president said? Okay, Caitlin, Matthew.
Woodrow Wilson.
Said what? America needs to
Help the British.
Well, he said America must go make the world safe for democracy. Yes, help the British. Okay, that was part of it because it's a more democratic society, right? But the mission was global, to make the world safe for democracy. All right, so America had the choice, right? It made the decision, we're going to go to Europe, we're going to fight this war on behalf of democracy. Okay, I say that and I offer up that example as a contrast to Canada. Why? Because when England went to war, Canada automatically went to war. No choice. Is it possible for that to happen to an independent country? Right? An independent country chooses for itself, decides what to do. Canada had no right to decide for itself. In World War I, Britain joined and Canada joined automatically. This is just an enlistment poster. It's kind of neat because it's got the British flag again up there, right? We see the Canadian version of it. And then we have these names of these soldiers who are being recruited, and they're all French names. But they're Canadian names, and they're going to go fight in Europe on behalf of the mother country, which now is England, also on behalf of France, because they were on the same side. But basically, Canada was part of World War I without a choice. It's not like America. The Americans decide, okay, we're going to go because we're going to try to make the world safe for democracy. No, with Canada, it was automatic. So by World War I, Canada is still not independent. So you can see why I like to use the Canadian flag as a symbol of Canada today, because it's a symbol of independence. But look at this story. By World War I, we still don't have an independent country. Not really. So becomes this interesting story, this interesting question. How do we get this country today? Right? When does Canada become independent then? Because it's a little bit of a mystery. I suspect most Canadians don't even know the answer. Right? Because you celebrate Canada Day, well, that's 1867. That's only halfway there. So when does Canada become independent? And how are we going to know? Before I get to the answer, how are you going to know? I'll give you guys a hint here, right? Because World War I shows us that Canada is not independent. When do you think we're going to have another chance to check? Not enough of a clue. World War I's, we're looking. Are you independent or not? Sigourney?
World War II?
World War II, right? Because what's going to happen? Britain's going to go to war again against Germany again, right? It's all over again. So if Canada's not independent yet, it's got to go, right? It's not a choice. Well, as it turns out, we're going to see that Canada is independent by World War II. So what happened? Well, again, in very Canadian fashion, it's not a rebellion. It's not any kind of violent break with Britain. In fact, it was once again a kind of a grant by the British Crown. This is the symbol of the British Parliament here. So that's what I'm using to symbolize a law that was passed in Britain in 1931 called the Statute of Westminster. It applied to Canada and Australia, and it granted those countries more than dominion status. It really truly made them into countries because at this point, thanks to this law, they had a choice who and when they're going to go to war. Because before, if the British go to war, Canada goes to war. But as of 1931, no longer. Of course, how do we know? We look at World War II, and we see the outcome. Now, you may know Canada fought in World War II, as did America. Again, for different reasons, though. The United States wanted to stay out really, really desperately because World War I was so awful. Americans didn't want to be in World War II. Was forced to enter the war by the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Okay, so that's America's story. What's Canada's story? In World War I, Canada was in automatically, but then the Statute of Westminster says, no, you get to choose. Okay, so what did Canada choose? What would Canada choose? If you look at the story, you see the relationship between Canada and Britain. What is it? How would you characterize this relationship? Confederation, meaning Canada becomes a dominion. It's a gift from Britain. The Statute of Westminster. Canada becomes a fully independent country. It's a gift from Britain. What's the relationship? Does it look good to you? Right? Looks like a good one. Sigourney?
Friends and allies?
Friends and allies, good one. Yeah, right. I mean, this is a deep, important friendship. It's more than friendship because it's more of a parent-child relationship. It's a parent-child relationship, and so it's a really, really close relationship. It's more than friends and allies. It's very special, to a considerable extent, unique. And Canada's ties to Britain remain to this day. And Canadians still have a link to the British monarchy that Americans don't have, and a fascination with that. And some, I think you can still see it on Canadian money and so on. And so, yeah, the ties are very, very strong. So when World War II came along, here's another recruitment poster, but and interesting that it's symbolic that the British flag is in the background. Canada doesn't have a flag yet. It's World War II. Canada doesn't have a flag yet. So the Canadians were very much invested in fighting in World War II. Why? Because they're going to protect their mother country. So the idea is, though, that because it's an independent country, the Canadian government wanted to make sure that that is clear, right? That this is different now. We're in a different relationship. It used to be whatever Britain says goes. In World War II, though, the Canadian government very deliberately did something that says Canada is independent. So what it did was just symbolic. It waited 1 week. So Britain declared war on Germany, and it's at war. Had it been World War I, Canada's automatically in. But it's World War II. Canada's independent now. So the Canadians waited 1 week and then declared war on Germany on behalf of Canada. See, so Canada is now, that's truly a full-fledged independent country. Right? That would be the test. This is a country, it's going to decide, if Canadians are going to go to war, it's Canadians who are going to decide. And they did. They went and they defended their mother country. But at the same time, this is a country that's gradually evolving on its own terms and becoming very different. Like America, Canada has absorbed a lot of immigrants from Europe, but also from Asia and all around the world. Canada has become very much a multicultural country. It has these roots, especially French and English roots. They're very strong and they'll probably never go away. But at the same time, increasingly in modern times, Canada has truly become its own independent nation, and the flag symbolizes its independence. American independence is an act of violent rebellion on behalf of individual rights. Canadian independence is a quiet process, very respectful and thankful to the mother country, but in the end, it's still independence. Canada is a unique country, and it has a wonderful presence in the world. People truly respect this country everywhere around the world. When they think of Canada, they do understand that it's special. It's a free country. It's a really special place, and they see it. Whenever the flag comes up, everybody knows that's Canada, that's Canadians. They're proud. They love their country. It's unique and it's different. And of course, in modern times, because the United States is this colossus, and it's because it's got this overawing presence, right? Canada now, Canadian independence, is very much expressed in terms of, not so much in terms of now its relationship to Britain, but more in terms of Canada's relationship to the United States. Its massive, overawing neighbor. Now Canadians rally to the Canadian flag, and again, it's part of that symbolism of their unique country. All right, so we're back here in the present. This ultra recognizable flag and the symbol of a country that was adopted in 1965, and now you know Canada is the country that it is because of its unique history. And so that's the theme for today. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit of Canadian history. There's all kinds of fascinating stuff in there, and I'd be very interested to keep going with you guys if you want. And so I will be offering an advanced Canadian history in one lesson, and that's going to start up, I think, in early September. So I will send you links if you are interested. It's going to be another one session class, and it'll build on what we've done today. I will send you a recording of today's class, and you can listen to that, and you can do a quiz, and you can do a bunch of stuff to reinforce what you've learned today. From there, of course, you've got a lot of paths you can follow. And if you're interested in the way that I provide history lessons, then I'd love to have you in History at Our House. August 22nd, I am starting live classes of European history this year. And I go through a cycle, go through different subjects. So I'd like to welcome you there if you're interested. So there you have it, everybody. Thank you for attending today. I'm going to leave it up to you now if you have any questions about what you've learned, or if you have any comments. I welcome both. Go ahead. Sigourney, go ahead.
That was a great class.
Well, thank you. It's nice to have you back again. And Sigourney's a veteran of history at our house, so she has been around for a while, and it's always been a pleasure to teach you. Matthew, Caitlin.
Thank you.
All right, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Okay, guys. Well, we made it here, so thank you very much. And like I said, I'll send you an email. You'll have a recording, and you can follow up with Advanced Canadian History if you like, okay? Terrific. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
You bet.